is Focus with Jack Cottle.
Good evening, I'm Jack Cottle. Welcome to this month's edition of Focus. This month we are previewing the 2023 session of the South Dakota State Legislature. Two guests with us to talk about that. Senator Mike Dietrich of Rapid City. He represents District 34. He's the Assistant Majority Leader in the Senate. Also with us is Representative Kirk Chafee. He is in District 29, which is in Meade County. He is one of the majority whips in the South Dakota State House. Now, the 98th session of the South Dakota State Legislature kicks off on January 10th with Governor Kristi Noem's State of the State address in the state capitol in Pierre. The 37th and final day of the legislature set for March 9th, and everything comes back for veto day on March 27th. We're going to start with you, Mike. What are your expectations heading into the legislature here for the 2023 session?
Well, I think we'll have an exciting year. There's going to be a lot of issues and a lot of diverse issues out there. Some of it's going to be related to the fact that we have pretty strong revenues that are coming into the budget, and there's a lot of good uses for those revenues. And then there's a lot of also good thoughts on maybe we don't need to have that many revenues and we should reduce some of those revenues through reducing taxes. We'll have issues related to that, and that'll affect spending. It'll affect education. It'll affect nursing homes and health care, some reimbursement levels. It'll affect homeschooling. It'll affect the things that we do with our local governments, and how we'll address issues that may be related to elections and how they're conducted, or maybe how things are being operated related to regional jail facilities and how they are should be created or operated. But it's all of those issues tie into money. Plus we'll have social issues, the abortion issues. There'll be a big question we'll look at is what types of further restriction, if any, will be acceptable to the public. There's going to be a lot of ideas both ways on that, and the legislature is going to have to take a look at that and do their best to decide what best reflects the will of the public in that area. Prisons, we had interim study during this last summer. We had the Juvenile Justice Task Force work, and they came up with some ideas on things that they think should be done related to juvenile justice and how to prevent recidivism, how to keep those kids out of being institutionalized, but if they needed it, how to give them the best care and treatment so they would do better when they get out. We looked at regional jail facilities. How do counties fund that? How do they operate? Who manages them? What statutes might be in the way of that? It's a county obligation. It's not the state's obligation under our Constitution. Which brings me to the third one, is the task force on the state's incarceration fund, which we looked at all of the state prisons in South Dakota and looked at the facilities, the programs they do, the population, the security, the workforce adequacy, all of those things to determine where does South Dakota need to spend money to ensure that their prison system is effective in preventing recidivism and effective in keeping the people who work there secure as well as the inmates secure, and what can we do to make sure people re-enter into society in a productive way. So there's some big number of recommendations that come out of that as well. So that's just some of the things that I see coming. It'll be entertaining no matter what committee a person may sit on.
Kirk, how about you? What kind of expectations you have for starting up here in January?
Sure, I share a lot of the same feelings the senator does. It should be entertaining, but I think I am excited, looking forward to it. I think that there's going to be one of the highlight issues, I think, going in this will surely be the exemption on grocery tax versus the property tax. This summer, we had a summer interim committee talking about property tax and what can be done there, as that is kind of one of the concerns that I hear as a legislator for Western South Dakota, the communities in the Black Hills, with the escalating market values. In tow comes the escalating property taxes that go along with that. So along the same lines with what Senator Dietrich talked about, keeping the economy strong in South Dakota, will be, we've got where the sales tax is generated. I think we're $130 million more than projected for this time. So there's our economy is doing well. Right now, I think some of the issue will be to make sure that we are ahead of that inflation, that whatever that inflation, if that's 8% or whatever, that we remain ahead of that in caring for some of our service providers and teacher salaries.
Let's start with probably the most visible issue, which is the grocery tax. Governor Noem had promised that if she was reelected, we're going to get rid of that grocery tax. The legislature, though, is the one who has to actually do that if it's going to be done. Where do you see that going when you guys start talking about it?
Well, the dialogue has already started, and the analysis has already started at multiple different levels as to what would happen if that was implemented, and how could it be best implemented? How can we be sure that it's fiscally responsible for future generations? How can we look at what the analysts have to say about their economic predictions, and are those additional excess sales tax revenues going to be sustained so that we're never behind? Because the state is, by constitutional provision, we can only have a balanced budget. And so within our budget is a large amount of mandated funding for programs that have been created over the years, and then there's the more discretionary funding, the general funding. The question of how will it work, it'll depend a lot on the Appropriations Committee. They'll go through a lot of that analysis in extreme detail and come out with their recommendation. The governor's budget was a little over $7 billion for 2024, fiscal year 2024. And the chairs of the joint appropriations committees reminded us that that's the governor's recommendation, and as they go through things in more detail, they'll come out, see what they can use and what they can't use, and what keeps us fiscally responsible as a state. So, and we also have the housing issues to deal with and ag issues. So, but I think there's a desire on the part of the legislators. I just feel this. I'm not speaking for anyone, but maybe my impressions. Desire to reduce taxes and regulations at some level in the state of South Dakota. And then, so with the tax side, then the question is what taxes, or how could you reduce those taxes? Because there's a lot of taxes, and Kirk, you can help me here. There's the grocery tax, there's the lottery tax, there's the insurance the banking tax, which is really they call it a franchise fee, but it's a tax. There's a lot of taxes out there that could be impacted by different economic conditions. For example, the contractor's excise tax, the volume of new permits and new construction is expected to decrease, but at the same time, the cost of the materials, and so the permit price is still going to be high. So is that going to balance out and stabilize so that it's dependable in the long run for that portion of tax revenue that the state utilizes for the programs that we have to?
Kirk, how about for you in the House? Where do you see the grocery tax issue going in the House? Are you optimistic about that going through?
You know, I'm on the House side. It's been brought up several years in the past. Last year, it actually passed on the House side. So I kind of look forward to it passing again. Right now, I'll get to hear that bill either on State Affairs, which I'm a committee member on that, or I also chair the House Taxation Committee. So I think the dialogue right now, is that the price tag, or what, the grocery tax represents about $120 million. And what the analyst has been is that our economy is doing so well, it's almost like we are covering that and some more with the economy and the strength of that. So what we'll be looking at is, once again, will we vote to approve that? I'm going to guess so, but I think there's going to be a lot of conversation on the property tax. So what a great state to live in right now when your legislature is talking, what's the best way to cut taxes? That's what I'm really optimistic about above everything else. So I think there will be definitely the conversation of property tax versus grocery tax. One or the other, or is there a combination of both? Or even, I know, now that you mentioned that the contractor's excise tax was something that was recently just brought up and discussed a little bit within the committees that I was in. So interesting points.
All right, we got to take a break. We'll continue our look at the 2023 session of the South Dakota State Legislature when we continue with this month's edition of Focus. I'm Jack Cottle. Welcome back to this month's edition of Focus, talking about the 2023 session of the South Dakota State Legislature, which will begin shortly. Representative Kurt Chafee from District 29, one of the majority whips. Appropriation and funding always one of the big issues every year in Pierre, and no matter how much money you have, there's always more wants than there is money to be had.
Right.
What are the priorities for funding as you see it this time through?
I see the priority for funding is it's going to go back to our, the education system, for the teachers' pay, for some of our service providers in nursing homes. I think those are some of the big issues. There's years, South Dakota's we've had a very strong economy for the last couple of years, as juxtaposed some other states during the pandemic. And it would be nice if we could see that growth continue, but there's a portion deep down inside me that says that may not be the case. So, talking to some legislators that have been past legislatures, we're kind of in the awkward position where you have so much money coming in. How do you make the right decisions? It was almost simpler. Maybe the senator can chime in on this too. Is when there was less money, you had less discussion because that pie was certainly smaller. But either way, I think in a good position right now to try to do something with spend wisely the money that we got now, and if there is, let's see what we can do about putting money back in the taxpayers' pockets.
And Senator Mike Dietrich from District 34, Assistant Majority Leader in the South Dakota State Senate. What do you see as the appropriation priorities for this year?
Their priorities are really focused on ensuring that we have a balanced budget and that we meet all of our mandatory funding requirements, and then that any funds that are special appropriations for one-time monies, for example, the prison Incarceration Task Force recommends that they build a women's facility in Rapid City for $60 million. We have a men's facility out here, so these are for the lower custody level inmates. But we have a sufficient workforce out here, and it works well for that facility, and it'll work well for a women's type facility. It's a one-time funding that the state would put in that. The operations and the rest of that in the future would have to continue to come out of our general bill, our funding bill. And so I think that their concern is to ensure the fiscal sustainability of South Dakota in the future, of meeting their constitutional obligation, and then working with educating the legislators, because we'll have different bills, different legislators will have bills that are of maybe more interest to my area or a different area, but they're important in general, that we have to balance out those priorities. And the appropriators are really good about making sure we keep our eye on the big picture, and if we want to do more special expenditures, that we do it under the principles of a good, reasonable expenditure of those dollars. But overall, I think the appropriators too would like to see a reduction in some form of a reduction in taxes for South Dakotans.
Now, voters passed Medicaid expansion in November. How does that change what you're doing in Pierre this year and perhaps down the road a little ways?
Well, the Medicaid expansion brings in a newly eligible population that are already working population, and so that volume of people, that number of people, it rotates all the time, depending on how much money, what their income is, whether they qualify or not. It won't cost the state, the total according to LRC was about $3.8 million for the first 5 years. But there's a savings on the other side of that too that exceed what the cost to South Dakota would be. So those savings, there'll be a bill this year to take those savings, over 100, probably maybe over 100 million. I shouldn't quote a number, I don't know for sure. But there were savings that appropriators agree, and so do policy people, that we should take those savings and put them into a fund that will be utilized for the Medicaid expansion costs in the future after the 5 years and beyond. So kind of like creating a trust fund. I don't know if that would be the exact way we would do it, but putting those dollars aside to help pay for future increases. It's probably around $22 million a year ongoing increase. which really isn't, when you look at some of the expenditures in the state of South Dakota, that's not a very high ongoing expense. But when you put them all in a pile, then it doesn't matter which one's big or little.
Millions
How
add
do we
up.
make it work out?
Kirk, how do you look at the price of Medicaid expansion and what effect that might have on what you need to do in the legislature?
Well, like it will begin the first 5 years. I think after that is when we'll start seeing the true expense of it. It's estimated at that point we'll be funding, somewhere around $80 million to fund that annually. So I think, it's the bill is coming. It's through the federal government to entice states to do this. They subsidize that cost for the first 3 years and I think up to 5 years. It's after that's really when the bill will come, and then I think that's when we'll really see the full effect of it. It's 5 years from now.
Now, one of the things that is going to have a big effect here, the overturning of Roe versus Wade, the South Dakota trigger law kicked in. How do you see the legislature addressing that in this coming session?
With reverence and with care. It's an emotional, it's a serious topic. It tends to be very polarizing. Sometimes it gets to be a party issue, or even within party, it can be one extreme to the other. I think when we take a look at this, I caution everybody to keep in mind that there are human beings and a child, and an unborn child at stake there when we address this. I know currently it will be a ballot issue, if I'm correct, coming up on that. I think what we'll see in the legislature, we'll see the discussion will be on what type of exemptions we'll be giving. If right now it's if the life of the mother I see is in danger, I see probably some definition changes or parameters and what does that term actually mean. And then there'll probably be some bills, and most assuredly on case of incest or rape, but it will be an emotionally charged conversation, to say the least.
How do you see that going this year? Obviously, both sides, you won't find many issues both sides feel as strongly about is what you have on this one.
Yeah, I think the black and white percentage of that issue is pretty large, and so the gray area as far as voting or making a decision, an individual decision as a legislator, I don't think that's a very big percentage of the population, but I think that there'll be bills that will talk about can we penalize or prohibit someone from going out of state, or can you prohibit a health plan from reimbursing for someone who goes out of state to get a legal abortion if they choose to do so. So there'll be a lot of issues, and it will be divisive, but I think in the end that issue is never going to be completely resolved, and we're always going to be having those discussions. I think the traditional exceptions will be kind of the primary battleground,
right,
as Representative indicated.
All right, we got to take another break. We'll continue our look at the 2023 session of the South Dakota State Legislature when we return with this month's edition of Focus. I'm Jack Cotto. Welcome back to this month's edition of Focus, previewing the 2023 session of the South Dakota State Legislature. Senator Mike Dietrich is the Assistant Majority Leader representing District 34 here in Rapid City. The medical marijuana business is getting up and running slowly. We have some dispensaries here in this area up and operating. How much discussion do you see on marijuana laws coming up this year? Adjustments to the way things are running now, or perhaps any recreational talk?
Well, there is a committee that met related to the medical cannabis issue and looking at changes, maybe some potential changes in the statutes, current statutes, tweaks, nothing major as far as I know in that area. I do know that the quest for recreational cannabis continues to be out there. So there'll be attempts to try to work that in some ways or others. But I think that South Dakota made it clear in their voting, and I think that the legislature and all the citizens who came in and testified and provided information for the structure of the medical cannabis laws are going to be pretty reluctant to make any significant changes that somehow open it up. You know, they might want to change it that for the conditions. There's 7 conditions that you would qualify for if you had a debilitating condition. There's 7 certain ones that it could be increased by petitioning the Department of Health and then providing the information, the evidence that would hold that up. And then public hearings. I think there's maybe a question about, do we need to make that so cumbersome and regulatory? There's all that evidence is out there, and could perhaps the Department of Health make that decision without going through such a big process. But I don't see anything big happening. I don't see recreational marijuana being in any way authorized by our legislature. But you know what? We make predictions, and sometimes we're just totally off.
Didn't see that coming, yeah.
Absolutely. Representative Kurt Chafee from District 29. You have a more rural district than Mike does. How about ag? What is up ahead for ag in the session this year?
You know what? Some of the historically in District 29, some of the issues on ag was primarily taxation of it. I think one of the, as those years kind of unfold and we've gone into that productivity valuation of ag, some of those issues kind of died down per se. I think right now the issues that I know the county commissioners are meeting with were some section line law issues, and another one that's been brought up is some of this foreign investment of buying up ag land in South Dakota. I see the governor. And she had kind of issued what would the correct word be on?
Her executive order.
Executive order, thank you, on that, trying to stymie or prevent as much of that as going on. So I think that's going to be a big discussion. I know that there's some legislators within the House are kind of looking into that issue a little bit. I have not yet delved very deep into it, so may not be the best for the information right now on that.
Now the district maps change for this year. How's that redistricting changing what's going on? Or does it?
For District 29, I think it had a less impact. We are getting more like the Lawrence County, where Lawrence County district and their county footprint is almost identical the same. With District 29, it kind of shrank a little bit. We were going up almost into the Belle Fourche. We took in the Newell area, and we came down into the Ellsworth Air Force Base, Box Elder area. So right now, it kind of, District 29 kind of shrank to a majority. I'd say probably 95% of Meade County's footprint, with a little cutout for the Blackhawk area that's in District 30, I believe.
All right. Got about 30 seconds left to go. Looking forward to getting up to Pier and getting going?
Oh, we're very excited. We're all working on things, sharing information, trying to get things started, and make sure that we work transparently. And you know, we're out to protect stronger families. We're out to help with the egg industry. We talk about that ownership. There's a federal model that looks at external ownership. That might be something we can do in South Dakota. We're looking at less regulation and taxes.
I got to cut you off. Senator Mike Dietrich, Representative Kurt Chafee. Want to mention we did invite a Democratic representative. They did not make it to the program today. So that'll do it for us for this month's edition of Focus. Hope to see you again the first Sunday night of next month. Good night.